The weight of knowledge. The castle archives smelled of old parchment, dust, and the peculiar mustiness that came from centuries of accumulated knowledge. Shamaz had been here for 3 days straight, sleeping in brief intervals at the desk, eating only when Rose forced food into his hands. The silverleaf supplies were gone now. The last dose had been administered to Edrick yesterday morning. Every moment that passed without a solution was a moment closer to catastrophe. The old scholar's eyes burned as he traced another passage in a text written in the angular script of Old Thornhaven. His translation notes covered the margins in cramped handwriting that grew increasingly desperate as the hours wore on. The binding of essence to flesh requires 3 elements, he read aloud to the empty room, his voice hoarse. The vessel must be willing. The prison must be forged of the prisoner's own nature. And the key. He paused, squinting at a word that had been partially obscured by water damage. The key must be sacrifice? No, that's not right. The character is wrong. He reached for another reference text, this one from the Urith archives that Illyria had brought from the stronghold. The same passage appeared there, but in the flowing script of the ancient empire. His finger traced the corresponding word. Not sacrifice, he breathed. Surrender. The key must be surrender. Footsteps on the stone stairs made him look up. Rose descended into the archives, her face drawn with exhaustion. She hadn't been sleeping either. None of them had. She carried a tray with bread, cheese, and watered wine. You need to eat, she said, setting it on the desk, and sleep. You're no good to him if you collapse. I'm close, Shamaz insisted, gesturing at the scattered texts. The answer is here, Rose. I can feel it. The binding that Edrick created wasn't meant to be permanent. It was designed to fail over time, to force his descendants to face the choice he made. But Edrick has done something different. He didn't just accept the fragments. He claimed them. He made them his. Rose pulled up a chair, studying the old man's notes. What does that mean? I'm not entirely certain yet. Shamaz rubbed his temples. But every binding I've studied requires the vessel to fight against the prisoner. That's what creates the prison, the constant resistance, the eternal struggle. Edrick fought the heart fragment for decades. It eventually killed him. Edrick is fighting too, Rose said quietly, every moment of every day. Yes, but he's not just fighting. Shamaz tapped the Urith text. He's also claiming. When he merged with the fragments at Old Ravenhold, he didn't try to destroy them or seal them away. He made them part of himself. Do you see the difference? Rose frowned, thinking. He's not trying to keep the devourer out. He's trying to keep it in. Exactly. Shamaz's eyes gleamed with exhausted excitement. And that changes everything. The traditional binding assumes the vessel wants to be free of the prisoner. But what if the vessel chooses to remain the prison? What if surrender doesn't mean giving up? It means accepting. You're saying he needs to stop fighting? No. Shamaz shook his head emphatically. He needs to stop fighting against himself. The devourer is part of him now, truly part of him, not just a parasite or a curse. If he keeps treating it as something separate, something to be resisted and expelled, the prison will eventually fail. But if he accepts it as part of his own nature, he trailed off, staring at the texts with sudden understanding. Rose leaned forward. What? The sealing blade was forged from the devourer's own essence, Shamaz said slowly. And it merged with Edrick's blood when he took in the fragments. It's not a separate weapon anymore. It's part of him, just like the fragments are part of him, just like his royal blood and his human will are part of him. So he's, what? Part king, part blade, part monster? He's all of them, Shamaz whispered. And none of them. He's something new, something that's never existed before. The question is whether he can accept that truth or whether he'll tear himself apart trying to be only one thing. Rose stood abruptly, her hand going to her sword hilt out of habit. I need to talk to him. Wait. Shamaz caught her arm. There's more. This passage here. He pointed to a section near the bottom of the page. It speaks of the price of transformation. What is claimed must be paid for. What is merged cannot be unmade. The prison that walks will know neither death nor freedom until the prisoner consents to silence. What does that mean? Shamaz met her eyes. I think it means Edrick can't die, not while the devourer lives within him. The fragments and the blade are sustaining his body, keeping him alive regardless of injury or age. But it also means He can't be free. Rose finished, her voice hollow. Not unless the Devourer agrees to stop fighting, and that will never happen. Perhaps not never, Shamaz said gently, but not soon. Not in our lifetimes, certainly. Maybe not for centuries. Rose turned away, her shoulders rigid. He's trapped himself in an eternal war. He's bought the world time, Shamaz corrected. Time to prepare, time to find another way, time for the people he loves to live their lives in safety. While he suffers alone, not alone. The old scholar stood, his joints creaking. That's what I need to tell him. He doesn't have to do this alone. We can help him. There are techniques, rituals, ways to strengthen the prison from the outside. The Urith knew them. My people in Naswaiwana preserved some of them. If we work together, a distant shout cut him off. Then another. The clash of steel on steel echoed down from above. Rose's sword cleared its scabbard as she sprinted for the stairs. Shamaz grabbed his staff and followed as quickly as his old legs could manage. They emerged into chaos. The great hall was filled with fighting. Castle guards battled against robed cultists who had somehow breached the walls. Blood slicked the ancient stones. Commander Aldwin stood at the center of the melee, her sword flashing as she directed the defense. How many? Rose shouted over the din. 50 that we've seen. Aldwin parried a cultist's blade and drove her own through his chest. They came over the walls at 3 points simultaneously. Coordinated attack. They're pushing toward the king's chambers. Rose didn't wait to hear more. She charged through the fighting, her sword singing as it cut down cultists in her path. Shamaz followed in her wake, his staff glowing with protective wards that deflected thrown daggers and desperate sword strikes. The corridors leading to Edrick's chambers were littered with bodies, both cultists and guards. The door to his room stood open, hanging from one hinge. Inside, Edrick stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of 6 cultists. His armor was on, but he hadn't drawn his sword. Green light pulsed beneath the metal plates with his heartbeat. "You cannot contain our god forever," one of the cultists hissed. Her eyes glowed with corrupted green fire. "We will break you. If not today, then tomorrow. If not tomorrow, then the day after. We are patient. We are eternal." "So am I," Edrick said quietly. His voice carried strange harmonics, as if multiple voices spoke in unison. "I have all the time in the world now. How long can you wait?" The cultist lunged. Rose moved faster, her blade taking the woman in the throat before she could reach the king. The other cultist turned on Rose, but Edrick's hand shot out, not reaching for his sword, but extending palm forward. Silver light erupted from his hand, mixed with threads of green. The cultists froze, their bodies rigid. "I said I have time," Edrick repeated. The light intensified. "You don't," the cultists screamed. Not with their voices. Those were locked silent by whatever power held them. But Rose heard it anyway, felt it in her bones. The Devourer's rage channeled through Edrick's will, burning through the corruption that animated the cultists' bodies. When the light faded, 6 corpses collapsed to the floor, their eyes empty and human once more. Edrick swayed. Rose caught him as his knees buckled. "That was foolish," she said, supporting his weight. "You could have just killed them normally." "I wanted to see if I could," Edrick admitted. His eyes, still his own brown, not green, met hers. "The Devourer's power, but my control. My will directing its strength. It worked." "At what cost?" Shamaz demanded, arriving breathless in the doorway. He examined Edrick with sharp eyes. "What did it take from you?" "Nothing I wasn't willing to give." Edrick straightened, pulling away from Rose's support. "I'm fine. What's the situation?" "Under control," Commander Aldwin reported, appearing behind Shamaz. Blood spattered her armor, but she stood straight and uninjured. "The attack has been repelled. 43 cultists dead, 7 captured. We lost 16 guards." Edrick's jaw tightened. "See to the wounded, honor the dead, and bring me one of the prisoners." "My lord. Now, Commander." Aldwin hesitated, then nodded and withdrew. Shamaz moved closer, his voice low. "Edrick, I need to speak with you. I've found something in the archives. Something important." "Can it wait?" "No," Shamaz said firmly. "It concerns what you are now, what you've become, and what that means for the future." Edrick looked at the bodies on his floor, then at Rose, then at the old scholar who had served his family for decades. "Tell me." Shamaz explained his findings, the nature of the binding, the importance of acceptance over resistance, the price of transformation. As he spoke, Edrick's expression shifted from weary resignation to something harder to read. "So I can't die," Edrick said when Shamaz finished. "Not while the Devourer lives within me. And the Devourer cannot die while bound to you," Shamaz confirmed. "You are locked together, prisoner and prison, merged into one being. Forever, unless the Devourer surrenders, which will never happen." Edrick moved to the window, looking out over his kingdom. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. "Everyone I know will grow old and die. Everyone I love will leave me behind. And I'll remain, fighting this war inside myself, for centuries, maybe millennia." "You'll also be able to protect them," Rose said quietly. "All those people, all those lives, for as long as they need you." Edrick turned to her. "Is that supposed to comfort me?" "No." She met his gaze steadily. "But it's the truth. You made a choice at Old Ravenhold. Now you have to live with it. Or exist with it, at least," Edrick said with dark humor. "I'm not sure living is the right word anymore." "Then we'll help you learn how to live again," Shamaz said. "There are ways to strengthen your control, rituals that can reinforce the prison, knowledge that can teach you to use the Devourer's power without letting it use you. And when those fail, then we find new ways." Rose stepped beside him at the window. "You're not alone in this, Edrick. You never have been." Footsteps in the corridor announced Commander Aldwin's return. She entered with 2 guards dragging a bound cultist between them. The prisoner was young, barely 20, with wild eyes and a symbol carved into his forehead that still bled. "This one was leading the group that tried to reach your chambers, my lord," Aldwin reported. "He's been vocal." "About what?" Edrick asked. The cultist laughed, the sound edged with madness. "About your failure, false king. You think you've won? You think you've imprisoned our god? You've only delayed the inevitable. The seals are breaking all across the kingdom. The corruption spreads. And when you finally break, and you will break, everyone breaks eventually, our god will be free with all the power you've so carefully gathered." "I'm not going to break," Edrick said. "Everyone says that." The cultist's grin widened. "But we have time. We have patience. We have faith. How long can you hold out, I wonder? A year? 10 years? A century? We will be here, waiting. Always waiting. And when you slip, when you falter for just one moment, then you'll find out what happens when a prison fights back," Edrick interrupted. He crouched to the cultist's level. "I'm not your god's victim. I'm its jailer, and I'm going to be very good at it." The cultist spat at him. Edrick didn't flinch. He simply stood and nodded to Aldwin. "Put him with the others. I want them all questioned. Find out how they coordinated this attack. Find out where their strongholds are. And then I want those strongholds burned to the ground." "My lord," Aldwin acknowledged. The guards dragged the still laughing cultist away. When they were alone again, Edrick turned back to Shamaz and Rose. "You said there were techniques, rituals. Show me." "Now?" Shamaz asked. "You've just fought off an attack. You need rest." "I don't need rest anymore," Edrick said flatly. "The Devourer doesn't let me feel tired. It doesn't let me feel hungry or thirsty or any of the other things that make me human. So if I'm going to hold on to my humanity, I need other ways to remember who I am. Show me the rituals. Teach me the techniques. Help me learn how to be this thing I've become." Shamaz and Rose exchanged glances. "All right," Shamaz said finally. "But not here. Not in chambers that reek of death. Come to the archives. We'll start with the foundations, the mental exercises that the old Urith priests used to maintain their identities during long meditations. And I'll stay with you," Rose added, "every step of the way." Edrick looked at her for a long moment. "You should leave. Find someone else to protect. Live your life while you still can." "No, Rose," I said no. Her voice was steel. "You're stuck with me, Edrick, for as long as you can stand it. And if that's centuries, then I suppose I'll have to figure out how to keep up." Despite everything, Edrick smiled. It was small and sad and didn't reach his eyes, but it was genuine. "You're stubborn. I learned from the best." They left the chambers together, descending into the archives where ancient knowledge waited to be rediscovered. Behind them, the sun finished setting, and darkness claimed the castle. In the cells below, 7 cultists waited with patient faith. In the kingdom beyond, 2,000 more stood vigil at strongholds and hidden temples, watching and waiting. And in the deepest part of Edrick's consciousness, where the Devourer raged against its chains, a new understanding began to form. The prison was learning. The jailer was adapting, and the war that would define the next age of the world had truly begun. In the archives, Shamaz spread out texts while Rose lit candles. Edrick stood between them, neither fully king nor fully monster, but something new and strange and terrifying. Something that might just be strong enough to hold, if he could learn to accept what he had become. If he could surrender to the truth of his transformation without surrendering his will. If he could find a way to live with the darkness inside him without becoming the darkness itself. The answer was there, somewhere in 3,000 years of history and magic. They just had to find it, and they had all the time in the world.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.